So, John, the legislature in Vermont has been gracious, hopefully, with some funding, and you're now getting ready to put that stuff at use. So, tell me about your approach. What are some of the things that you're putting in place with that funding?
Yeah, so the legislative season is really a biennium over 2 years. The legislature over the past 2 years has given us over $140 million in money to modernize state government. If there's one thing that we learned out of the COVID-19 pandemic was the need for digital services, and that really reinforced our approach to offering services to Vermonters, no matter where they are and what they're doing at the time, making it easier for them. So we took on 3 big initiatives under that funding: DMV modernization, UI modernization, and ERP, or Enterprise Resource Planning, to give us a better view of what our employees are doing and our financials to be able to use that data to make better decisions.
So let's talk about the DMV modernization. It's something you talked about at an event a couple weeks ago. What goes into that? I mean, obviously the DMV is kind of the common pain point that people talk about, right?
It is.
So what is your approach? What are you all working on there?
Right. So I'm looking at it. I'm stepping back and looking at it from the enterprise, right? Because there's so many things that are involved with the DMV modernization outside of the DMV. What does our digital identity look like for the citizen? What are our integration platforms that we're going to use? How are we going to make sure that whatever we build can be repeated in the future and creates us less overhead going forward? So with the motor vehicles modernization, we're specifically looking at a all-in-one solution, trying to partner with someone that can offer not only vehicle services but driver services and integrate into the other platforms that we use across the enterprise to give us that better 360 view of the citizen to help them.
So let's talk about the all-in-one choice, because I think that's an interesting one in an era, especially where you see states sort of breaking things up into smaller chunks. Why the all-in-one approach? Why now? How does it sort of fit into that modernization plan?
Right. Well, in this space specifically, we are contracting with FAST. They have a 100% success rate. They bring employees into the state that live and work in our community. They move here. They're part of our team. Their investment in Vermont is as big as ours in their company. And we've rolled FAST out in our Department of Taxes, as well as a smaller module in the Department of Motor Vehicles. And we've been successful. They're well liked, and we know that we can be successful in that model with them. So we feel comfortable in this approach because we have a great partner.
So you talked about UI modernization, ERP modernization, two more traditional, I mean, I guess maybe not UI, but two a little bit more traditional in the IT house. When you were the first CIO, or you're the first CIO to lead the Agency for Digital Services,
Yep.
What does that cabinet level approach enable you to do for something like a DMV modernization, to work agency head to agency head to get that done?
Well, one of the unique things about Vermont, and we hear a lot through our NGA partners and NASCIO, in Vermont, the governor holds a weekly cabinet meeting. All cabinet members are there weekly, where we have time to discuss different approaches, different operating environments, and really, work as a team. The governor is extremely big on building teams and making sure we're there to solve each other's problems. So no one really likes to talk about technology at the cabinet level, right? But they all know how important it is and how one thing can affect another. So oftentimes we're talking about the value that we're going to bring to Vermonters. And when we talk about the DMV, I can say, Secretary so-and-so, this is how it's going to relate to your agency down the road, and here's the value to you. And Secretary so-and-so, here's where it's going to integrate with your systems, and here's how we're going to do that.
So let's talk about UI for a second, right? One of the biggest probably headline during the pandemic of crisis, one of the biggest things that went wrong in pretty much every state with a few exceptions.
Yep.
What's your approach there? I mean, how much is going to go into this modernization effort?
Right. So there is an RFP on the street for phase 1 right now, which is really the front end of the system, bringing immediate value to Vermonters that are doing business or trying to get services through the Department of Labor. And that's really to help things like, where am I in the process? right? I submitted my paperwork. Why haven't I heard anything? It's been 8 weeks. That was one of the primary complaints that we heard through the pandemic. So we're looking at phase one being a short-term phase that will bring immediate relief to at least knowing where you are in the process of submitting a claim. Phase two will be the much bigger back end that replaces the mainframe and really goes through all the different modules, adjudication, and all of the different modules that make up a UI system. So phase one, immediate, short-term solution to bring, Vermonters some relief and understand where they are. And then phase two, probably a 3-year effort to modernize and get us off the mainframe.
And then, lastly, when we talk about ERP, right, it's definitely not the sexiest or flashiest topic, but it's so essential to so many mechanisms of government. How are you going into an ERP modernization in 2022?
Well, ERP was one of the first things that I pointed out that, really needed a strong look at and what it meant to the enterprise. As someone who's been in government for over 20 years and worked in many of these agencies, I knew who had their own ERP systems of their own and what it cost them. One of the part of the value of the centralized agency is, all those contracts run through us now. So we know, at transportation, this is the system they use and this is what they pay for it. At labor, this is the system they use and this is what they pay for it. At HR, here are the different modules that really don't talk to each other. And here are the costs of them. So we went through a deep analysis of what a new SaaS modern solution would cost compared to what we're spending now. And we believe conservatively we can save up to $30 million over 10 years. So, that's real savings for a small state like Vermont.
Wow. And then, lastly, it's not just funding from your legislature. We have ARPA funding, infrastructure funding coming down the pike for you. So when you're looking at all of these different now awakened sources of money that maybe weren't there a couple of years ago, in addition to these projects, what are some of the things on your hit list? What are you trying to get done with some of these fundings?
Yeah, so getting back to the foundational state of identity, integration layers, common frameworks for case management, common frameworks for constituencies and businesses. One of the projects that we have going on right now is a one-stop portal for businesses. The other side of the equation is the citizen, right, or the resident of Vermont. And how do we tackle that to give us a 360 view of the citizen and be able to offer service to them faster with a no wrong door approach to ensure that they know how to get in and get the services that they need from Vermont.
So you've been in government over 20 years.
Yeah.
What is your biggest surprise when you look at that time that we're actually doing something now? What's the most surprising to you? And what's your biggest disappointment?
Yeah. So for me, we've really flipped the way we procure things right onto its head. We choose the technology before we do a procurement now, which is a lot different. So if you go out to our website, go to the bottom, it says ADS ecosystem. We've laid out which technologies we're going to use, which platforms ahead of time. So across the enterprise, there's no discussion on this vendor versus that vendor from a technology standpoint. Every dollar is competitively bid through SIs and licensing and all of that, but we have a solid foundation of which technologies we're using and how they work together. Big achievement, through my lens, and knowing 5 years down the road in our 5-year roadmaps, which technologies we're going to use. It lays out a long-term strategy, not only for IT, but for the business, and to be able to help them further plan down the road what their funding is going to need to be in order to use the systems.
And what's something 20 years in, what's something you're like, man, how have we not gotten this done yet?
Yeah, I think it's really around identity still. Right? We've talked about, how do we not only do a single sign-on, but how do we integrate these systems together? No one wants 15 passwords. No one wants 15 different usernames. No one wants to, try to figure out which agency am I supposed to talk to, right? We want to be able to offer a singular door to really bring people together. And I think, we're getting to the point now where we're strong enough and mature enough to be able to do that. But it's been a struggle for many, many years.
Yeah, that's great. Anything else? Anything I've missed that you're excited about nowadays?
Yeah, we're finishing up a procurement right now for a security information event management system. That's a big project for us, or a strategic priority, specifically around having more visibility across our enterprise to make sure that, through a single pane of glass, we really have eyes on everything across the executive branch. And there's opportunity, I think, with the CISA grants coming out, the IJA grants, to be able to maybe roll in the municipalities and the K through 12 using some of that money. And we're waiting on for more guidance from the feds, but our plan is to be able to expand that to municipalities to make sure that not only do they have visibility, but we have visibility as that whole of state to make sure that we're able to see what's going on at that municipality level, what's going on at the K through 12 level, and really be able to not only brief the governor but brief the legislature on what the state of security is in Vermont.
Last thing, and because you brought up municipality collaboration, it's, some people would say a smaller state like Vermont, something like that is easier. That's not always the case. I mean, I don't know the exact number of how many municipalities you have, but what's that collaboration look like? What is some of the work that you have to do to facilitate that and make that happen?
Yeah, it's definitely a federated model where it's not easier because we're smaller in that aspect. There's 251 municipalities, right? So looking across the wide spectrum, many of those municipalities have somewhere between 1 and 5 employees, right? So when you think about not only collaborating, but offering services or offering cybersecurity training, most of those people that are working in the municipalities are doing multiple jobs and are strapped for time themselves and resources. So it's a challenge, but we have some really good partners that are able to facilitate some of that are kind of I wouldn't call them the lobbyists, but the overseer of the municipalities, called the Vermont Leagues of Cities and Towns. And they help us get the message out and collaborate at the local level.